Okay, I know this is a pretty late video, but let's just talk about it anyway, okay? Charles Barkley. He's an interesting guy, man, and he says whatever's on his mind. And today, I'm going to talk about what he said a couple of days ago in the podcast he was in regarding Rich Paul and how he's a problem, apparently. Now, full disclosure, I'm not a fan of Rich Paul, so I'm not coming here to defend Rich Paul or anything, and I have no interest to defend any side here. I just want to make sure that people understand my point of view, and also I always love when people write in the comments and tell me what they think about this certain topic that I'm talking about. Okay, so let's get into it. Charles Barkley, when responding to Ben Simmons wanting to leave Philadelphia, said, "Well, I don't believe that. You know how that group works," referring to Rich Paul and Clutch Sports. Now, context, Simmons is associated with Clutch Sports. That's why Charles Barkley is alluding to them. They try to trade their players to where they want to. They had better deals from Boston and I think maybe New York, but they're like, no, he's gonna go to LA and gonna play with LeBron, or he's not gonna play. They just bullied the league. At some point, a team of the league gotta stand up and say, wait a minute, I paid your guy. You can't bully me to trade him and me taking some trash back. So I'm hoping somebody in the Sixers organization got some stones. And boy, when you listen to that, when you hear what he says there, you can't help but just shake your head and say, wow, this guy is throwing it. This guy wants all the smoke, man. Charles Barkley, man, he's no stranger to controversy. We all know how riled up he can get. Unfortunately, it's a mixed bag, okay? I don't agree that Rich Paul is the problem because, look, you can't blame somebody like AD for wanting to leave, and you can't blame these guys for, being disgruntled and seeing how the franchise isn't doing so well and not doing their job of trying to get the best pieces to surround Davis, right? You can't really blame these guys, and if that's a problem, what's the alternative going to look like, all right? It's probably going to be the franchises having so much control that they'll have a big stranglehold of where players go, and that's not a good thing either. But also, I do agree with Charles Barkley in part that there is this problem where a player can come in and be disgruntled out of nowhere and make things so much worse for the team that they end up being forced to trade him away for assets that really don't help out the team at all. And it's just there is such a bad situation that happens, and it happens so many times. And today in this video, I'm going to cover two of those instances that are far worse than what AD did to the Pelicans, because when AD wanted to leave Pelicans, he had only 1 year left in his contract. And what the Pelicans got in return to trading Anthony Davis was pretty good as well. They got Brandon Ingram, who rose to become a prominent player in the roster. You had Lonzo Ball and Josh Hart, who were pretty solid. And you had a bunch of draft picks that are going to for sure help the Pelicans in the coming years. So what about the instances where things got worse? Well, these guys, it's a different story. So now we're going to scroll back to a year before the whole AD fiasco even happened. And this is going to be during the offseason when Jimmy Butler was very frustrated with the Minnesota Timberwolves and how the franchise was being poorly run. And it makes sense to be frustrated. Now, there's a lot that goes into running a franchise, and there's a lot that executives do that screw up with that process. And Jimmy Butler was tired and he wanted none of it. He didn't even sign the extension that they offered him, and he did not contact the team or the coach for a very long time. And then he came back training camp, and there was a whole incident on practice when he apparently destroyed the starters, and he took them on with a bunch of third string players, and he was calling them all out. He was calling out coaches, he was calling out his teammates, he was saying things to demoralize these guys, and these guys apparently were left speechless. And this whole fiasco ended with him being traded to the Sixers for Robert Covington and Dario Saric, okay? Like like what kind of a deal is that? Like, Minnesota got very little in return for a player like Jimmy Butler, and not only that, but Jimmy Butler was able to force these guys to even trade him to the Philadelphia 76ers. And it's to the point where it's just so sad And obviously, when you see where the Minnesota Timberwolves are now, like they're nowhere near where they were when Jimmy Butler was in the team, and it's upsetting to see how a guy can come in the locker room and just be so abrasive. And I remember when the whole practice incident happened, people were laughing and people were really on and people were actually on Jimmy Butler's side. They were loving it. They were like, yo, Jimmy Butler, bro, that's a big move. That's a power move, alpha move, bro. This guy was so strong. He took them on. He said mean words to Wiggins. He said Karl Anthony Towns is a wuss. Like, I remember those days, man. I remember being confused. I was like, why? Why are people taking a side here? Like, this is awful. It should have never come to this. And so now I'm going to now scroll forward a year after the whole AD fiasco happened. Okay, you see what I did there? I'm trying to relate them because they're sort of relatable, but they're not at the same time. But this one, I think, is the worst out of all of the incidents I've talked about. This is the worst one. Okay, November 2020. Well, that's when it really kicks off, but we'll talk about October 2020, preseason, Houston Rockets. James Harden has been talking to his boys. He's been talking to people around him and saying that he doesn't want to be in Houston anymore because Daryl Morey ended up leaving the Rockets after the loss that they faced against the Lakers. And that loss was so bad that a lot of changes had to be made. D'Antoni left as well. That's the coach that Harden wanted to play with. And Daryl Morey was the guy that got Harden so many of the players that he wanted to have in his team. And so at that point, Harden was just done with the team and he wanted to be out. So apparently, Harden was training with Kevin Durant in the Mamba Academy and he was just training it up with him. He was talking to him like, hey, yo, wouldn't it be fun if we linked up together? This could all be gossip. But a lot of this did happen. Like a lot of the things where they corroborated this and that and the third, I think some of those things are true, but we can only speculate on the extent to their communication. Now, there were people around him saying, well, look, Harden, you should go to these teams. And he was interested apparently in three teams being the Philadelphia 76ers, the Miami Heat, and the Brooklyn Nets. And it seemed like for a moment that he was going to go to Miami during the offseason when Houston was apparently being told that Harden wanted to be traded. And then Houston said no. We wanted better pieces, but Miami said no. And so now he has to play during the season with the team he doesn't want to be in. Now, Harden, he was out of shape when he came in training camp. He was partying a bit too much, and perhaps he was partying just as much before, but he made sure to make it public now to anger the board of governors at Houston. And it was such a messy scene that you have people being suspended. I remember, who was it? Lou Williams? No, not Williams. Who was it? Someone in the team got suspended for going to the strip club. It was so bizarre, man. The whole scenario was bizarre. Now season starts, they play a couple games. Everybody's talking about Harden. Where's he gonna go? And then Harden comes in press conference and says, "Look, the team's just not good enough to win." And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Right there. That's when Houston knew they had to trade this guy immediately because that's basically fighting words for I don't like you guys and I don't want to play for you guys. As if all the other things he did beforehand wasn't enough. He had to come out himself and say this team ain't shit. That's basically what he said. Okay, and so they had to trade him and they traded him for Jack Squat. Okay, they traded him for what was it? Karis LeVert at the time, and then some random guy named Kushus. And I'm not even sure if he's still in the team. Maybe he is, but he's not gonna be playing any minutes anytime soon. That's for sure. And oh wait, did I say Karis LeVert? No, sorry. They ended up trading Karis LeVert to Indiana for Victor Oladipo. Okay, sounds good at first. You have John Wall with Victor Oladipo, and then you have DeMarcus Cousins. Oh wait, Christian Wood's now in the team as well. It's a pretty interesting dynamic. But then Victor Oladipo gets injured, and the team just cannot work it together because a lot of these guys, it's their first time being together. John Wall's a new player as well, and John Wall he plays with the ball a lot, and it doesn't help with the chemistry of the team to really play that way. And Houston Rockets were just bottom tier, and they were the worst team in the league, hands down. And it was to the point where now we're looking at Victor Oladipo going to Miami, and you have now a team in Houston that they had the second pick, but at the same time, they're not looking to really improve much since then. And it's really sad to see how Houston has really fallen off. And a lot of that being due to James Harden wanting out of Houston. And this to me is the very worst of players coming out and saying, I want to be traded, I want to leave the team. Because it just brings this whole drama not only to the fans but to also the teams and the players that are even there. And then you're also making them forced to trade you so that you can play in a better team, but they're gonna suffer in return. And I think it just sucks to have this scenario play out. And I think if Charles Barkley is to be mad at anybody, it is to be mad at either Jimmy Butler or James Harden for what they did to those franchises.